Hey, good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are. My name is Bonnie Howard. I'm a senior fellow with the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. And I'd like to welcome you to this peer exchange, realizing the potential of out of school time to deliver high quality programming for early learners and their parents. We're delighted that you've chosen to spend time with us today. As some of you may recall, we began this webinar series on two-generation approaches to poverty alleviation in partnership with United Way Worldwide and Ascend last year. In that series, we gained an appreciation for what it means to be two-gen. We explored two-gen approaches, both in policy and practice, that help low-income children and families. We heard from national experts to help us think about how to frame two-gen, and local United Ways on the front line talked about what's working on the ground. And by the way, if you missed any of these webinars, they're all available on our website. Again, this year, we launched our series during GLR Week with strategies to increase the likelihood of kindergarten success. Today, we continue to delve into two-generation approaches by looking at the power and potential of out-of-school time to help ensure early school success. For over a decade, the Campaign for Grade Level Reading has been talking about the importance of attendance and the impact of what's been called the summer slide, really since the inception. And in the wake of the pandemic, our networks continue to prioritize strategies to combat the learning loss experienced by children from economically challenged, fragile, and otherwise marginalized families. The urgency of focusing on those approaches and strategies which hold the greatest promise for an equitable learning recovery cannot be understated. And one of those strategies is capitalizing on out-of-school time. We've got to make sure that young people are attending school, and we also have to take advantage of the time outside of school. Afternoons, evenings, weekends provide additional opportunities for high dosage tutoring and an array of services, programs, and activities to complement academic goals. And we know that out of school time programs are a lifeline resource for families. While parents are working, these programs provide safe learning spaces for kids to be with friends and caring adults. In the summer months, out of school time programs provide much needed learning experiences that keep kids on track. So let's not also forget about the role of the community itself. Those everyday places, spaces hold great promise for transforming ordinary places into learning-rich environments. Grocery stores, barbershops, laundromats, they can all be formidable out-of-school learning environments. So having a safe place to go at the end of the school day with out-of-school time programs gives children the chance to reinforce what they're learning in school, helps them build social skills, and creates additional space for them to receive attention from qualified caring adults. And with that, I'm going to introduce our speakers who are going to take us through this webinar conversation today. We're very lucky to have with us an expert in this area joining us, who is Marjorie Sims. She's the managing director of Ascend at the Aspen Institute, a convener for diverse leaders working across systems and sectors to build intergenerational family prosperity. Marjorie has more than 20 years of experience in advancing the status of women and families at the local, state, national, and international levels. And our panelists include Iola Fortune, who is the Vice President of Impact Team at United Way Worldwide. She provides oversight, strategic guidance, and support to team members, managing key initiatives in education, economic mobility, health, human trafficking, and disaster relief. She leads efforts to support local United Ways to advance equitable community impact by developing frameworks, strategies, peer learning, and training opportunities. Sarah Link is with United Way of Massachusetts Bay, and she's the Senior Vice President of Early Education and Out of School Time, where she leads efforts to promote economic justice through strategic grant making and systems change in education. With 13 years of experience, she focuses on partnerships that support young people's socioeconomic emotional learning. Sarah holds degrees from Harvard College and the Harvard Graduate School of Education. Casey Osiello is also with United Way of Massachusetts Bay. She's the Chief Community Impact Officer, where she's worked for 18 years. She leads strategic initiatives focused on financial opportunity, volunteer mobilization, and systemic solutions in areas such as childcare, youth career pathways, housing, and financial inclusion. She holds degrees from Cornell, Harvard, and Syracuse. Dan Cruz is with the Chief Operating Officer at United Way of Delaware, with extensive experience in public policy, education, and nonprofit sectors. His leadership in public service and systems change is rooted in his background, working with organizations like Hope Street Group, the Delaware Department of Education, and the Christina School District. Dan has served in legal roles and held numerous board positions in Delaware. Ken Livingston is the director of Get Delaware Reading. He's focused on improving literacy in Wilmington's 8 Promise communities, where many children struggle with reading proficiency by 3rd grade. He builds relationships with community leaders, develops marketing plans, and leads initiatives like My Very Own Library, which provides free books to students. He holds degrees in sociology, criminal justice, and human services. And to round out our panel is Hetty Chang. Hetty is the founder and executive director of Attendance Works, a national initiative focused on improving student success by addressing chronic absenteeism, and a long-standing partner of the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. With over 30 years of experience in family support, education, and child development, she's authored key reports on student attendance and promoted equitable 2-generation solutions. She's recognized by the White House as a champion of change in 2013, and he also held leadership roles at the Evan and Walter Haas Jr. Fund and California Tomorrow. So with that, let me say welcome to all of you. We look forward to engaging and learning. And I'm going to turn it over to Hetty to kind of get the conversation started. And just a really quick note, Hetty has to jump out for another meeting at 2 o'clock, so she won't be able to stay for us for the entire time. But please know that any questions you have for Hetty, we're going to be tracking them and we'll get back to you offline. Hetty, I'm going to hand the baton to you.
Thank you so much, Bonnie. What a pleasure to be here. So I get to talk a little bit about why the current situation with chronic absence makes it even more important for us to tap the potential of expanded learning programs to make sure kids are in school every day so that they can benefit from all the opportunities that they offer. If you go to the next slide, I just want to start by getting clear a little bit on terms. So a lot of times people think about attendance in terms of average daily attendance, which is typically how many kids show up each day. Truancy, which is how many kids are missing without a legal excuse. And chronic absence, which is really looking at missing 10% of the entire school year or any point during the school year, that including excused, unexcused, and suspensions. We are talking about this issue of chronic absence because it's so important for us to notice when kids aren't there, regardless of why they're not there, so that we recognize that they're missing out on key learning and social emotional learning opportunities. The shift to chronic absence away from truancy is really about trying to take a prevention-oriented, problem-solving approach that recognizes that actually when kids face trauma, for example, that can result in chronic absence. And at that point, you don't want to be saying what's wrong with you. You want to say what happened and how can I help you? Because it's that family and student engagement that is so key to success. And we'll come back to that. But this term chronic absence can be is important also because when we look at average daily attendance and truancy, the levels of chronic absence can actually be masked. And if you go to the next slide, I do want to spend a moment saying, why do we care about this? And why is the campaign for over a decade now invest in this? And it's because we know that chronic absence in these earliest years is so essential for the young learners. Kids who are chronically absent in pre-K and K are less likely to count and read proficiently. They're also, this is actually associated with declines in educational engagement, social emotional development, executive functioning. The impact is greatest for kids who are living in poverty, who don't have as many resources and supports at home, often because of the economic challenges their families face, to make up for lost learning opportunities in the classroom. And this routine of attendance is just so important as kids enter school because it helps them become less anxious, connect to their peers, and really start to launch a successful opportunity to learn in the elementary grades. And if you go to the next slide, you can just see that, chronic absence is so important throughout addressing chronic absence. Ensuring good attendance is so important for ensuring a successful school trajectory, K-12. Next slide. So what we know is that the chronic absence crisis really it grew exponentially during the pandemic. It nearly doubled in every place in the country. It slightly decreased in the 22-23 school year. That's what we know from state data. And we're seeing another slight decrease in the 23-24 school year, but we still know that chronic absence remains much higher than it was before the pandemic. And if you go to the next slide, you can see that it is affecting all grades, but the high levels typically start in the earliest grades, which is again a reason why folks who are interested in early learning and early literacy and early numeracy really want to pay close attention to this issue. If you go to the next slide, what we've seen is that chronic absence really reflects an erosion in positive conditions for learning. Kids and families come to school when they feel school is physically, emotionally healthy and safe. And yet during the pandemic, we said, stay home. Then also we've had a rise in school violence, bullying, making families and kids nervous about how safe school is. Kids and families feel show up to school when they feel a sense of belonging, connection, support. The shift back and forth from virtual to in-person and nervousness about, being around too many folks, sometimes because of the worries about catching COVID, or even the safety measures that we put in place in schools can mean that we've sort of not been able to reinstate those bonds, those connections. And we have to do that requires intentionality. This issue of academic challenge and engagement, especially when kids are showing up sporadically, it can make it harder to engage. And then making sure investing in the adult and student well-being so that they can invest in the relationships that are so essential to putting all these positive conditions for learning. If you go to the next slide, you can see, what we know is that if you want to improve attendance, if we want to address this crisis that we face, we really have to understand and address the underlying causes of absenteeism. And I say this because, as we'll see throughout this, expanded learning programs can help you do that. But we have to understand, is it barrier? Is it aversion? Is it disengagement? Is it misconceptions? And these are all things that expanded learning programs, I won't go into detail here, can help to address. If you go to the next slide, you can see expanded learning is really part of a multi-tiered approach that helps to start with making sure that we put in place those positive conditions for learning that I said earlier. Make sure that we put in place universal prevention, for example, making sure kids are hearing and knowing that they were missed when they weren't there, making sure that they have enriching opportunities that make them want to be in school. And they can also be part of early interventions, because sometimes you can do check-ins through mentoring, through tier 2 supports that expanded learning programs can actually play a role in offering, because sometimes the time outside of school is an opportunity when some of those kinds of supports can be delivered. If you go to the next slide, you can see that what we really see is that you have to put in place these key ingredients of change. You have to have actionable data, so you can see where you most need positive engagement and where you need to forge strategic partnerships to both support and reinforce that engagement, but address barriers like transportation or health that might prevent kids from getting to school or after school. You can use this data also to then think about, where do I have to have adequate and equitable resources because some kids need more support? How do I really support shared responsibility with schools, community partners, and families working together to improve attendance? And then how do I build capacity for all of those things? And you can think about expanded learning programs being part of that infrastructure of capacity to improve attendance. If you go to the next slide, one of the things that we've seen is that, I think sometimes, and I realize the pandemic now feels like ages ago, but the impact is still pervasive. So some of the kids who have suffered the most during the pandemic are the ones who most need to really now experience the joy of learning, receive support over time, and be in enriching environments that support their socialization and learning. And we need to use data to notice where we're making a difference and where kids need more. Next slide. So expanded learning programs can use chronic absence data to think about, what are the schools that most need their in-school and summer learning opportunities? or who are the kids within a particular school, the individual students or groups of students, particular grades maybe even, who most need expanded learning. And then think about how they can use their opportunities to engage kids and families so they can find out what might be barriers and why, what might be solutions. And I want to say, as a parent who had kids in expanded learning programs, sometimes expanded learning programs, one of the things they offer is when you pick your kids up, it's often when you have a little bit more time, when you could be speaking to someone, when someone could reach out to you. And expanded learning programs often are populated by people who are more from the community than even the school staff and might be able to do that outreach that really supports that student and family engagement. And then you can use data from both the expanded learning program itself and the school to understand what's working and who needs more support. I realize I'm kind of just presenting some of the information in different ways, but if you go to the next slide, what you can see is that one role they can do is creating this culture of engagement and attendance by taking role every day. This is something expanded learning programs can do, even just starting with the time that kids are with them. They can reach out to families if they're not showing up and finding out what's going on. They can create appropriate incentives, not perfect attendance, but every time a kid shows up, hey, I'm so glad you're there. They can use their engaging program activities to motivate attendance. And they can even engage kids themselves in figuring out what are meaningful messages that resonate with other kids. If you go to the next slide, I just wanted to offer, we've been hearing about the Ad Council Research Institute recently released new research on about 5,000 families. It was first focus groups and then a survey of over 5,000 families to help think about now post-pandemic, what do we need to know about what resonates with families about attendance messaging? And what they found was that it needs to be positive in tone. We had actually heard that a bit before the pandemic, but it has to talk about the opportunities associated with in-person learning, not just the consequences of missing school. And it can't just focus on the academics, but about how kids develop holistically. So school is an opportunity for you to connect with peers, to be engaged in fun activities, to be doing project-based learning. We during the pandemic, a lot more became available virtually, not to everyone, because digital access is still an issue, but it might create this perception to families sometimes that I can make up for it just by going digitally. And what's important is to remind families that for most kids, being around other kids for that social emotional development, for that engagement is still critical. And when we remind families, they resonate with that. That makes sense to them why our kids need to be in school. And when we have expanded learning programs, we can advertise the kind of exciting activities and engaging learning opportunities they offer. It can help families remember why in-person school is so important for their kids to be participating in. It's also true that how you message is important. So setting realistic goals, because families face a lot of challenges in getting kids to school. Being respectful of when they have hesitations. I'm worried that my kid's being bullied. I'm worried about my kid's illness. I'm worried about spreading illness to others. That's really important because we want to understand their concerns, not chastise or shame families, but hear their concerns and then help them address those concerns. And expanded learning programs really need to be seen as part of the infrastructure that schools have to support this messaging, with the understanding that a lot of times a child's teacher, and I think program leaders who are teaching kids in expanded learning often also have this stature, are among the people who families trust the most. So when they say, I'm worried about your kid, here's what your child might not be getting when they miss out on this opportunity, it carries more weight. But it also means that we have to improve the communications between expanded learning and school staff so they can do this messaging together. Next slide. So one of the things that we have that's a resource for thinking about effective messaging is this Showing Up Matters for Real toolkit. Talking to families about how showing up matters for building routines, because daily attendance can reduce stress, create a sense of security, especially after chaotic transitions or for our youngest kids as they transition into school. Showing up matters because it increases engagement. It's where you get to develop your relationships with peers and school staff. It's about providing access to resources, of which expanded learning is one of those things. Can you show that next part? And expanded learning can also sometimes be an opportunity for getting access to sports, to music, even health services that might not be as easily gotten during the school day. And then this is all about supporting learning. And if you go to the next slide, this is kind of a step two after you create that culture of attendance. Expanded learnings programs can really monitor their own data, so that they can see which kids might be having challenges and use that to identify support and reach out to families. And if you go to the next slide, expanded learnings can then also offer themselves as partners to the schools in which they serve. Find out if they have an approach, how they can support that approach, and figure out how they can compare insights with folks during the school day about what might be the challenges that students and families may face getting to school and getting to the expanded learning opportunities. Next slide. So we see what's really important, chronic absence, as I said, nearly doubled. And so we've actually at Attendance Works, in partnership with Education Trust and AEI, really put out a call for reducing chronic absence by 50% over 5 years. We think this is an important goal because it's aspirational yet plausible. We see states starting to meet this. It's also a very clear target. And if you click again, that can be adapted to different contexts. So while things may have doubled, it might not be in one community, it went to 30%, another went to 50%, in one state, it's different. You can actually adapt your goal depending on your context, but it is also trackable and accountable, because most of this data, when I first started, I think if you hold just a second, when I first started, chronic absence was only available in one state website. Now it's available virtually everywhere. So outside partners like United Ways, they can see what's happening in their own community and see whether reductions are happening or whether they're not. And this is also why it's so important to put this data out there publicly and get people aware of this, because it takes a comprehensive effort, which requires all of us supporting this work. And then finally, if you click again, this is really important about having a commitment over time, because that process of engaging kids and families, of helping them have faith and confidence and trust in our schools again, of building relationships, takes time. And we know ESSER dollars, that's the conversation later this afternoon, are now ending. And we need to find ways to sustain the work of engagement over time. Next slide. So last two things that I would just say, we have gotten 14 states already. They publicly committed. We made an announcement on the 9th of September that they're going to cut chronic absence by 50%. You can see it's across the country, every type of state. We have some more states already joining on. Washington, D.C. just joined. And if you go to the next slide, we have a suggestion for how states can get to this. They can have a team. They can agree upon their destination using their data. They can prioritize routes of which we see family engagement, student connectedness, relevant engaging learning, health, well-being, and safety, and access to learning as key strategies. And each state's going to have to decide which one's so most important. But these are also key strategies that expanded learning programs can help to implement, so that they can get to that reduction of 50% in 5 years, bringing us back even below where we were before the pandemic. So with that, Bonnie, that's a context for the work and a context for why I think really investing in expanded learning is even more important. And I guess I'm turning it over to Marjorie.
Oh, thank you so much, Hetty. Boy, that was a really rich presentation with a lot of information. And I have to say, I love the specificity of the goal and a roadmap for how to get there. Thank you for that. So, I'm hoping that participants may have a few questions for you, but I would like to ask you a few questions. And maybe this one specifically we will put you on the spot a little bit, and that is expanded learning programs. I would love for you to be able to share one or two of your favorites.
Favorite examples of,
Example of an expanded learning program in a community where you've seen a school partner. What does that look like?
yeah, well, okay, so I have seen some of the work that on early literacy where they create really, really exciting summer early literacy programs. This is some of the
Mhm.
stuff that Pam did with Scholastic. And what she found is that when you can create those opportunities in the summer times where kids really get excited about the learning, get to project-based, because you're not now, you have total freedom, that can be a way of re-engaging and connecting kids and helping make sure that they get back into that joy of learning. And if we can make sure that the kids who maybe sometimes don't get those opportunities during the school year, but get it in the summer, and then bring the information and show that back even to their teachers. So their teachers can see what kids are really capable of. I think that's an incredible use of expanded learning programs. Another thing I think is some of the people actually start to use the summer as transition programs. So
Mhm.
like the kids who are new to a school, maybe it's the kids who are just going into kindergarten, or maybe it's kids who haven't been in a school and are now in a school, and you use that program to both help the kid become familiar with the school, get into the routine of showing up, but also connect to their families so they know who are the supports and resources. And you can also do attendance messaging in that. So those summer boot camps, if you will, are another really great use of expanded learning programs and have had shown to have an impact actually on attendance.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you for those examples. One other question before I have Iola join our conversation, and that is, what are you hearing from parents about what they may need or what struggles that they might have in this space of addressing this issue? What are they
The
saying?
issue of attendance, issue of expanded learning, can you just say a little more?
Issue of attendance or chronic absenteeism.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. Certainly, kids' anxiety levels are at all-time
Mm,
highs. And families worry about that and
yeah.
struggle with how do you address that. And this is one of those things why I think it's really so I think there's both anxiety and then it's connected to it. There's a lot of concerns from families about bullying sometimes
I see.
is
Uh-huh.
happening on school. So, and those are not always the same thing. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I think this is where schools and maybe expanded learning programs can also play a role. We have to understand where those concerns are coming from, but also I think, and this actually connects to the health issues. So these are all get mixed together.
Yeah.
Like families get nervous about, they're not sure when to send their kid to school, or keep them home when they show symptoms of illness. So
Uh-huh. I see.
headaches are connected, but
Mm-hmm.
stomach aches can also be a sign of anxiety. And if you
Mm-hmm.
keep a kid home because they're showing stomach aches, it actually could increase anxiety because kids feel less connected to their peer,
Mm-hmm.
less part of the classroom. And that's when you really have to have a conversation with the family because it may be creating that routine and finding ways so that kid has a buddy in the classroom, doesn't feel anxiety. And if there's any kind of bullying going on, really hearing and addressing that immediately will be really important. So I think there's a lot of concerns that families have, but when we can listen and hear and understand what they're about, and then
Mm-hmm.
work with the school to create solutions, that's what then creates more faith and trust in schools themselves.
Yeah, thank you for that. I really appreciate that. And it also, those examples that you gave speak to the importance of the mental health supports and partnerships to support families in that way. So thank you. So I'm going to ask Iola to join our conversation now and share the work that she's leading at United Way Worldwide to address this issue and support families. Hi, Iola.
Hi, thanks so much, Marjorie, for that introduction, and to Hetty for that comprehensive deep dive. Hello to my colleagues in the United Way Network and to the many school and community partners who are joining us today. My role is to set the broader context for the specific efforts that you're going to hear about that are being led by local United Ways in the state of Delaware and in Boston. And I just have to say, just on the heels of what Hetty just shared, I think coming from a place of not blaming and shaming families around some of these issues is critically important. I also happen to think that's a strength of United Way in terms of many of our strategies and approaches in terms of supporting student success, centering the students themselves, their lived experience, and that of their families. And so I think that can go a long way to re-engaging students and their families in school through not blaming them for some of the circumstances and the hardships and some of the reasons why students are not showing regular attendance. So I'll take a step back, just to set some context for those of you who are not familiar with United Way and share that we're a global network. We have close to 1,000 local United Ways in 36 countries, including the US. The lion's share of those United Ways are in the US, 992, about one United Way for every congressional district in our country. And United Way, our vision and mission is to work to mobilize residents in communities to help create communities where everybody can thrive. For us, that means working on the core issues that our team works on: access to health, access to high quality education opportunities, and access to the opportunity through wages and job growth and earnings potential for economic mobility. These are the issues that impact people's everyday lives, and those are the issues that United Ways get up every day working to address within their communities. And to do that work, our approach is critical, and it's a differentiator for us. We work to bring people together to create solutions to address our most common and pressing challenges. And we work deeply, as you'll hear today, on specific issues. And we also adopt holistic, integrated approaches within and across the communities we serve, because we believe that the solutions we implement need to reflect the realities of the lived experiences of the people that we serve. And so that is fundamental for us in terms of not only what we do, but how we approach our work. If we go to the next slide, as I shared, we work in key issue areas, including youth opportunity. And our work in youth opportunity, as I'm showing data from our 2023 Global Impact Practices Survey, is focused on ensuring that young people have the resources, the supports, and the opportunities necessary for success in school, in work, and lifelong careers. What you see here on this slide are the most commonly employed strategies from cradle to career that local United Ways are advancing in their communities. And so it's a snapshot, which means, while not every United Way is implementing all of these strategies, when you look at our work in aggregate, collectively, this is the work. And so when viewed in aggregate, this includes United Ways working with partners to implement the strategies you see on this slide, including strengthening access to early learning and early childhood education programs being tantamount within that, increasing literacy supports both in early education, but also in elementary school and beyond, partnering with schools and community partners to support students, ensuring families have the resources and supports they need to support their child's learning, growth, and development, and enabling college and career access. So this gives you a sense of the prevalence of that work in our network based on the United Ways that reported. And we know, and Hetty spoke to this, that one of the most pressing challenges we face has been exacerbated by COVID. So it is clear, those of us working in education, working in out of school time for a long time, know that one of the most pressing, if not the most pressing from my perspective, ongoing challenges we face is to ensure that all children, regardless of zip code, race, ethnicity, ability status, place of birth, family income level, have access to quality education that prepares them for college, work, and life. It is a defining challenge of our time. And many of us come at that from different approaches. And we know that significant gaps and inequities persist. We also know that they were exacerbated by COVID, and the COVID pandemic, as you've heard already from Hetty, had a negative impact on student attendance, which of course relates to declining performance in school. And we've also talked about some of the mental health impacts. It made existing gaps worse. It did not create those gaps, but it made them worse. And unfortunately, for the communities, families, and students who were already bearing the brunt of those inequities. We also know we have solutions. And I worked in out of school time funded by the Mott Foundation when I was at the Council of Chief State School Officers for many years. I worked on out of school time and to build state policy and advocacy networks to create infrastructure to expand quality access and availability of out of school time. So I come at this with deep knowledge and experience, and I know that this is a solution, that out of school time is a proven strategy. We now have decades of research demonstrating this, that it is a well-proven strategy for the outcomes we care about most in terms of supporting student success. That includes attendance, but also grades, and in school overall school performance and development, the development of young minds. High quality out of school time programs are a vehicle for providing enrichment opportunities. 80% of the time that children, their waking hours is spent out of school, not in school. It's also a vehicle of providing individualized academic supports, including reading and exposure to new experiences, new ideas, new people. These experiences are essential. They're an essential component of what it means to fully educate and develop young people in our society, to prepare them. And that's pretty critical given, again, the amount of time that they're spending outside of school. And so the majority of local United Ways, upwards of 90% of our network in the US, lead and support out of school time efforts. If we go to the next slide, we know that United Way, and many of you may be partnering with United Ways, and United Ways are making investments. So United Way is well known as a fundraiser and an investor. But what I want to talk about are the other ways that United Ways lead and are part of the glue, part of building the infrastructure for high quality out of school time programs, which is essential to driving the outcomes we want to see. And so if you look at, any United Way, it's likely that they are investing in out of school time, including those programs led by well-known affiliated organizations like the WISE, Boys and Girls Club, 4-H, Big Brothers and Big Sisters, but also locally initiated school and community-based efforts that were created. They are homegrown and they were created to meet specific needs. And so beyond that investment, similar to how United Ways show up to work on other issue areas, United Ways play multiple roles, from advancing quality, investing in quality programs, access and availability. And you'll hear about those efforts as embedded in the work of our colleagues in Boston and in Delaware. Perhaps most importantly, it's the convening role that United Ways play in bringing stakeholders to the table, school and community partners, family members, advocates, to create a shared approach to out of school time in terms of what are our goals? What do we want to be true for young people in our community? How do we align and coordinate efforts across partners? How do we create the specific programming needed based on what we're hearing from family and school partners? But also critical, particularly in this time and given the challenges we're facing in education, is the role that United Ways play to ensure equitable access by targeting resources to students and areas, be those place-based approaches, specific zip codes, specific issues, and specific populations of students, really targeting those resources to areas of greatest need, as well as investing in capacity building. So not only investing in direct services and the programmatic supports, but making sure that our frontline staff are imbued with the knowledge, skills, and expertise they need as after-school educators. And that, again, relates to the outcomes. We know that we don't get the outcomes we want without that strong investment in program quality, and that means investing in the people themselves. And finally, United Ways play a couple other key roles, integrating out-of-school time as part of broader education initiatives. So as part of 2-Gen strategies, as part of community schools initiatives. That integration is critical to take a holistic approach to what it means to have wraparound supports that meet all the multifaceted needs of children and their families. And finally, raising awareness to drive continued public-private investment and support of out-of-school time. One of the landmark key developments in the out-of-school time field and landscape was the creation of the 21st Century Community Learning Centers program and the transition of that program in the early 2000s to state leadership under the state education agencies. But what that did is that institutionalized the role of state leaders and local education leaders as providers of support out of school time. So not just what is rightly their charge, which is to advance high quality education from 8 to 3, but also thinking about and resourcing what happens beyond the school day, because we know that what happens outside of school has so much implication for what we achieve in school. And so I'm thrilled to have our colleagues from Boston and Delaware share their work with you today. And with that, I'll transition back to Marjorie.
Thank you so much, Iola. I am deeply impressed about the work that you shared and the way in which, United Ways across the country are leading on this issue, working really collaboratively across their communities, and your leadership at the national level, lifting this up and and families. So thank you for that. And with that, I'm excited to hear directly from United Ways that are doing this work in their communities and those examples. So I'm going to turn it over to Carly and Sarah at the United Way of Massachusetts Bay, and they will share the work that they're doing. So welcome, Carly and Sarah.
Thank you so much. We're so excited to be here with all of you today to talk about this work. I am going to just do a brief overview to set some context about where our early education and out of school time work sits for our United Way. And then I'm going to pass it along to my colleague, Sarah, who will dive deep into the work that's actually happening. So you can go to the next slide. Just to set a little context, we are just 1 year into a 7-year strategy that we call the New Way Forward, that is really thinking about how we are advancing thriving, equitable communities within Massachusetts. And we came to this vision by doing deep listening in community. So we actually went out and asked people within the community. We paid them to go have conversations with their family, friends, and neighbors and asked them a couple of questions. what does financial well-being mean for you? What does it mean for your family? And what does it mean for your community? And through all that, we came to this vision that you see here, which is around making sure that access to financial well-being is universal and prosperity is shared across race and ethnicity. And that we want to track that by really looking at some population level changes within our communities. You can go to the next slide. So it's important to set this context because when you hear economic justice, hopefully everyone here can see the connection to early ed and out of school time, but that's not always the case when we talk about the work. But what we do know is that you'll see all these dots here. These are 12 communities within our footprint. And these 12 communities, 2/3 of the people living in poverty within our footprint live in these communities. So we are focusing our efforts very intentionally in these communities, knowing that each of them may have different needs, different assets that we can build upon. We are also focusing on public policy and practice changes at the local level and the state level. You'll hear about that. And a big piece, a cornerstone of this work is our grant making. So as I said, we have a 7-year strategy. We are providing 7-year unrestricted gifts to unrestricted grants to 124 partners within our footprint, many of which are focused in on early ed and out of school time. And the ask to those organizations is to join us on our systems change journey and to really be able to freely use the dollars where they need to so that they can join with us as we are looking to change things for our community. Go to the next slide. And here are the areas that we landed on. So when we asked those questions to community members about how they define financial well-being, these are the things that really bubbled up for them. So a big one was around economic inclusion and wealth building. Folks wanted to be able to set their own course to financial well-being and wanted to be able to do that in the context of their own culture, their own community. We also know that housing stability is incredibly important, so we focus in to make sure that homelessness is rare, brief, and a one-time occurrence. We focus in specifically on pathways for older youth and young adults who are oftentimes most marginalized from opportunities, and helping them set their own course for their life. And then what Sarah will talk about is our early education and out of school time strategy. So I'll save that for her. And then the final is, of course, to always make sure that we are there to help folks and help communities through crisis when it happens. So we really see the work that Sarah's going to talk about. Actually, it sits in number 4, but goes across all 5 of these issue areas. We are truly focusing in on the intersectionality of that work. So with that, I'm actually going to turn it over to Sarah, and you can go to the next slide.
Great. Thank you, Carly, and to everybody before us. So as Carly said, our foundational work on our course to economically just region really is on the basis of our early education and out of school time programming. Our work is really focused on those 2 generational strategies that everyone was talking about earlier. We know that we support multi-generational economic justice by supporting caregivers as they are on their journey of learning and working and providing those high quality learning environments for young people. So at the core of our investments are those high quality early education and out of school time. And the work that we're really doing with the portfolio of organizations is on this, creating this vision for a regional education sector that is integrated and connected, has adequate resources and funding, and is truly centered on the needs of youth and families. Please forgive this 3rd grade visual here. We're really trying to figure out the intersectionality of all of this, but the work that we're really doing that I'll describe over the next few minutes really does work on all of these areas where school and community partnerships can really lead to long-term outcomes for young people and their families. I can go to the next slide. So Carly talked a little bit about our grant making, so I won't go into a ton of detail here. We are investing in a set of both direct service and advocacy organizations as we think about our long-term work together. The unrestricted funding, one thing that we're really proud of is we went through some pretty serious, we had really serious conversations about the amount of money that we were investing. These are pretty reasonably sized grants considering their general operating support. We have various levels. So our direct service partners receive either $50, $75, or $150,000 a year for those 7 years. And our public policy organizations are funded at $50,000 or $100,000 a year. So we're really, as Carly said, investing in organizations who are really in it with us, in partnership with the organizations across the region, really working on all of these systems change efforts that we are co-designing, co-creating. We spent some time in our grant review process talking about those quality markers and things like that, but far more attention was really given to how the agency engages in their community, how they're centering community voice, how they partner in their community to do more with others than they could possibly do alone. So we really had a really interesting process where organizations were really able to tell us, what is it that you do unique to you, and what is it that you'd like to do in partnership with us and the network of partner organizations. I will go to the next slide. So a couple of things that we're going to chat about, in addition to the foundational investments we're making in organizations, as we're convening them around various strategies, everything we're doing really is rooted in our 2Gen strategies. I've got a laundry list here of a number of initiatives and strategies that we are partnering on throughout our region, and I'm going to do a deeper dive into 2 of them in particular. But we're really seeing some tremendous work that we're doing in partnership with nonprofit organizations, with state agencies, with our higher ed research partners. Our shared services work is really focused on revitalizing the family child care industry here in Massachusetts. We are training mostly women of color who are interested in opening up their own family child care homes, and really launching them on their long-term path to economic mobility. So it's both the caregivers themselves and running their small businesses and providing those high quality learning environments for families who really want to see more family childcare. As you know, many of you are probably seeing in your regions, family childcare in particular was really decimated during the pandemic, and yet is often what most families are most comfortable with that small home-based care. So we're really working with our state partners to revitalize that industry. We're doing a ton of work in system building. The state of Massachusetts has what's called the Commonwealth Preschool Partnership Initiative, CPPI. These are really significant investments, to the tune of about $20 million annually in communities across the Commonwealth to help them build their mixed delivery universal preschool program. So really partnering with school districts and community-based organizations to help build out those family-centered systems. And all building off of this is really the work that we're doing in the summer step-up program and community schools, which I'm going to talk a little bit about in the next couple of slides. So the Summer Step Up program was launched in the summer of 2021 as an effort to bring young children back to in-person learning opportunities. So Hetty talked a little bit about some of those challenges early on in the pandemic of remote care. We have had a long-term partnership with the Massachusetts Department of Early Education and Care to implement this initiative. We have been bringing together school districts and community-based organizations this entire time. I will say it also is an opportunity for us as United Way of Mass Bay to work with our sister United Ways across Massachusetts to really bring together all of those coordinating efforts that Ayola described of what United Ways do best in communities. So we have been really focused on those high quality summer learning programs that the research tells us all about in terms of the duration, the focus on young kids, and really focusing on our school readiness efforts here. You can go to the next slide. So over the last 4 summers, we have worked in 33 communities across the state. We've invested over $20 million in these efforts. The contracts that we're working on are with nonprofit organizations and school districts, and the range of children served each summer is mostly dependent on the funding available. I will say one of the really unique features of Summer Step Up has been that we've been able to establish performance-based contracts with our partners in Summer Step Up. So rather than, for those of you who've managed state or federal funding in the past where it's very intensive receipts and timesheets and all of that, we've been able to figure out a very nimble way of funding a particular rate for serving students per week in organizations. We've been able to fund a flat rate for professional development hours. So it's been a pretty efficient way for both us getting the resources where they're most needed and for organizations to report to us in order to unlock that funding. Part of the reason why we also have to do performance-based contracts is, as you can imagine, with state funding that is dependent on a fiscal year cycle that begins July 1, we have frequently not known how much money is available in the state budget until early June. So we have to move very quickly every summer to get those contracts in place. Our big exciting news is after 3 years of implementation of the Summer Step Up program, we were able to work with many of our local superintendents and mayors and state reps and nonprofit leaders to advocate for Summer Step Up having its own line in the state budget. And we have $6 million locked into the state budget this year. So that's been a really great policy win, really leveraging those voices of families who want the care, whether it's in a community-based organization or a summer school program, to have those full day extended learning time opportunities in their communities. So lots of really exciting stuff happening in Summer Step Up. And then the final thing that I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about is community schools. So we have joined many states throughout the country in really adopting the Community Schools Forward model that our national partners launched last winter. Many of you on this call have been doing this a lot longer. It's pretty new to us in Massachusetts. We are supporting 5 school districts, including Boston, and have launched a statewide coalition to advance a community schools movement here in Massachusetts. For those of you unfamiliar with the framework, it really is focused on 6 core practices, including family engagement and integrated student supports. And there's a strong research base both around decreasing chronic absenteeism and improving long-term academic outcomes. We're really excited about this because, you know, for decades at United Way, we have been doing really discrete projects, whether it's around STEM or family engagement or high quality OST in community that revolve around school and community partnerships. And the Community Schools Framework really provides us with a robust way of organizing all of the strategies that engage students and center students in this movement, and is really providing us with a great framework and a great language, a set of language, a set of skills to really be able to convene our partners to best support students. So more to come as we learn more, but we're really excited about all of this work happening in Massachusetts. I want to make sure we leave plenty of time for our friends from Delaware. So sorry for talking fast, but I will cede our time to them.
Thank you so much, Sarah and Carly. And I so appreciate all of the ways in which you're working with your communities, your families, your partners, and being very thoughtful about how you center, and also how you've been intentional. You mentioned how you've improved your own efficiencies internally to get money out the door sooner and faster and more efficiently. So thank you for that. Now it is time. I'm going to move directly to Ken and Dan, a little bit south of Massachusetts, that share with us the work that you all are doing. Thank you so much for.
Sure, fantastic. It's hard to follow acts like that, but Ken and I will do our best today. I'm going to start us off with the first couple of slides, if y'all don't mind popping those up, and then I'll hand it over to our guru, our fearless leader over our literacy work, and that's my buddy Ken. Would like to spend just a moment at the top. We can move to the next slide. Similar to what Sarah and Carly shared before, I want to pull us up just a little bit. I hope it's helpful to those that are attending today to hear at the data and the theory level, and to hear some practical examples about how some organizations like R2 United Ways are taking what we know and we believe and we've experienced from the impact on the ground, and then doing our best to weave together what best fits the needs in our diverse communities. So I'm going to spend a moment on this slide here, and I'm going to keep it at a high level because Ken will take us down into some detail around our specific early literacy work with students and with our youth. The one thing that I'll share is we are just stepping our first foot into a new strategic plan. We're a few months in, and we did spend a good 12 to 18 months with our board and our community developing this plan. And as everyone on this webinar knows today, communication is the name of the game. And it's so hard sometimes to communicate our why. And sometimes it's a little easier to communicate our what. And so what we've tried to do with our strategic plan, and I'm sharing this high level view of the plan now so you can see how we've looked at this, is similar to what you've heard before with our earlier conversations, in that every one of these 4 boxes, and each of the 4 boxes represents one of our 4 interrelated focus areas. It's all built with a dual gen intention, whether that be overt or covert. There's nothing that we do from a partnership, from a policy, from a program perspective that doesn't have either a direct or an access point from families to youth or from youth to families. And I know we're going to dig in just a moment when Ken talks about our yellow box, our early student success box, but I'm just going to take a minute or two and talk about the other 3 colors. There's other 3 boxes on the screen. And some of these things will sound familiar to you because many United Ways are involved with 211. We are the home for the Delaware 211 helpline. I'm spending a minute here, which may not automatically make sense when you think about early student literacy. But when we think about dual gen, we have continued to evolve, recreate, expand, you pick your adjective, how R211 in our state has additional utility to different audiences for different needs. It has been and will always be, if there is someone in crisis, we're there for you. But what we also are evolving ourselves into here is additionally, a resource database and a resource opportunity for human services. So we have spent a lot of time, and we've got a lot of really important partnerships with our State Department of Education. One of their investments into us was to help Delaware 211 always be the center for needs across the state. But when we think about out of school time, how can 211 be the easiest way for any Delawarean to call, text, live chat if they have a question about OST? We are also the home of our state after school network in partnership with our national funder investor, Mott. I don't think I'm supposed to say it that way, but with Mott. And so the Delaware After School Network Dean is also locked with United Way, locked with Delaware 211. Our Dean network is the network of the networks. I think if you're familiar with the out of school networks, that's their bullseye. What I'm talking about with our 211 is anybody anywhere can get in touch with our 211. And I'll just give a kind of a rabbit hole example. If you're looking for a middle school STEAM out of school time that takes purchase of care, that's in the western side of our most southern county. And maybe you know the school, maybe you don't, but at least you know the geography. We actually have a database that catalogs all of that information and all of those bells and whistles and necessary information. So one small micro example of how we're taking one of our core 4 plays, Delaware 211, evolving it, expanding it into always being what it was, but from a dual gen perspective, how do the adults in our youth's lives that need information and access can access that information, to overuse that word, at their fingertips? And then while we have them, again, from a dual gen perspective, how can we also probe and see if there are other needs that their family members, or the youth in their lives might have as well? And how can we help with that from the 211 side? I'll do a diagonal down to financial empowerment. And there too, may not be an obvious case where we're talking about youth literacy or early student literacy, but whenever we have the opportunity to engage with adults who have youth in their lives, we're always trying to talk about and program and provide resources for financial literacy as well. Those things go hand in hand, be it health literacy, financial literacy, reading literacy. Sometimes we overlook the financial literacy piece. And so when we are with someone on the Delaware 211 side, we're also connecting them. Our signature program there is Stand By Me, which is a one-on-one, personalized, curated financial coach for you. And we could spend a whole webinar talking about that, but there too, on that side, we're looking at from a dual gen perspective when we're helping any youth for any particular perspective and the adults in their lives. We're also trying to strengthen the financial acumen, the financial muscle, the physical financial well-being of the adults in their lives as well. There is a version of that program in the light blue box for our career and college success work. And I'm being mindful of all of our time, so I won't spend too much extra time on this, but this is where we're working with youth in high schools across Delaware, and every high school in Delaware, on financial literacy. So we're weaving the literacy need across all of our 4 core components in our strategic plan, our programs, and our partnerships. We're going deep and going wide in our early student success focus area, which is our yellow box, which is where Ken is our fearless leader. And I'm gonna hand the virtual microphone over to him to run through the next couple of slides. We know there's been a lot of talking at you for the last hour plus, so we've got a little bit of audio visual, a couple videos to watch as well to color in the point. So Ken, I will hand it over to you, my friend.
Thank you, Dan. And you can go ahead and transition to the next slide. We would just like to take a moment to illustrate our why through a brief video titled The Statistics Lottery, which shows the impact of children born into low-income zip codes and the barriers they face to becoming proficient readers.
Meet Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, and Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, and Jordan, and Jamie Johnson, 2 beautiful babies born on the very same day. Each baby has a good chance of landing in a good place in life, as long as one of them doesn't lose the zip code lottery. Like 1 million babies each year, Jamie's been born into a low-income family. And since Jamie's mom lacked access to good prenatal care, Jamie is much smaller than Jordan. And since they won't have access to brain-developing activities found in high-quality childcare, low-income children like Jamie will be 2 times more likely to experience developmental delays. It probably won't surprise you that by their 3rd birthday, Jamie's been exposed to a lot fewer words than Jordan. A whole lot fewer. And I imagine Jamie's 4th birthday won't be much better. By the time they reach kindergarten, Jamie will have already fallen behind Jordan in language and pre-reading skills by 12 to 14 months. And getting to school on a regular basis will be perhaps Jamie's biggest challenge. Unfortunately, a myriad of health, transportation, and housing problems will cause between 5 and 7.5 million Jamies to be chronically absent this year. But with summer right around the corner, you'd think Jamie would have plenty of time to catch up with Jordan then. Sadly, summer presents new challenges for Jamie, a mountain of challenges. You see, every summer, Jordan's learning will evolve by a month because of access to libraries, field trips, and camps, while Jamie will lose 2 months of school learning every summer because good habits such as reading haven't been reinforced. By the time they reach 3rd grade, Jamie will be between 2 and 2.5 school years behind Jordan in critical reading skills. And how much more likely is Jamie to drop out than Jordan because he can't read at a 3rd grade level? 13 times more likely, and the results of which are frankly catastrophic. Wait just 1 minute there, folks. The story doesn't end right there. Fortunately for Jamie and Jordan and all of us, there's a whole lot of folks out there that believe neither luck, nor lottery, nor zip codes should dictate Jamie's future, who also believe that our schools can't do it alone. Luckily, there are leaders, organizations, and good people out there that are dedicated to believing in a whole lot more. The solution right now is relatively straightforward if we can commit to 4 things. Number 1, we need to make sure our kids are healthy and ready for school. Number 2, we need to ensure they grow up in a word and book-enriched environment. Number 3, we need to engage them in healthy and educational activities over the summer. Number 4, we need to make sure that Jamie attends school every single day, because at the end of the day, you and I both know that lotteries, zip codes, and plain old dumb luck don't really author our children's future. We do.
I'm glad to see. I was watching the video and smiling at the same time, looking at all the remarks in the chat. I'm definitely glad that everyone kind of viewed the video and saw a need to kind of have it on their own and was asking for, is the video available? So the link for the video has been placed in the chat if anyone needs to see the video and kind of use it for your own program or organization as well. In partnership with the Campaign for Grade Level Reading, we created a Get Delaware Reading initiative, and we believe that literacy development starts well before a child enters a classroom, continuing with milestones like learning letter sounds and the letters, and ultimately achieving reading proficiency by 3rd grade. This crucial benchmark going into 4th grade marks the shift from learning to read to reading to learn, laying the foundation for academic success, preventing learning gaps and predictors of long-term educational outcomes. Our initiatives range from prenatal care to advancing literacy programs, enhancing parent engagement, providing access to books, delivering targeted resources, and community partnerships with the Delaware Department of Education, various school districts and schools, along with literacy-based organizations. Next slide. I just want to highlight a few of our initiatives that United Way of Delaware believes that are our strongest plays for addressing the literacy gap throughout the state of Delaware. Early development support with our Help Me Grow Delaware, which enhances young children's development by connecting families to vital resources by dialing 211. Parents gain access to developmental assessments and intervention support, crucial for laying a strong academic and developmental foundation. We build home libraries. We build these home libraries in low-income areas The book to child ratio is alarmingly low, as is reading proficiency. We know that when children do not have books at home, they are less likely to become avid readers. My very own library program has distributed over 450,000 books over 7 years to ensure children in all communities have the necessary tools to succeed. Closing the literacy gap for our youngest learners. This is done in partnership with the Nemours Children's Reading Bright Start Early Language and Literacy Success Initiative. They provide toolkits that are flexible, developmentally appropriate instructional tools that enhance the skills of early childhood caregivers in order to support the growth of infants and toddlers. The combination of experiences, books, and sensory items teach crucial language and literacy skills across all domains of learning to prepare our youngest learners for future school readiness and success. This program is grounded in research on brain development to lay the foundation for literacy and lifelong health. We also utilize a virtual tool called BookNook. BookNook is a cutting-edge educational platform based on the science of reading, designed to foster literacy development and a love of reading among students in a fun, interactive way. This innovative K-8 literacy tool is a standardized ELA tool that includes a pre and post assessment, as well as online culturally responsive curriculum that improves literacy. The platform identifies individual student reading levels and offers applied practice to help improve reading and comprehension fluency. We also focus on minimizing summer learning loss. We do this through high dosage reading enrichment and a statewide network of partners by providing 21st century after school programs to over 1,000 students, which include the Governor's Fellowship, our Freedom Schools Initiative, and once again, 21st Century Summer Enrichment. This year, we added a service learning project designed to foster an increase in children and families with library cards, thereby enhancing library system usage and ultimately fostering a love for reading. We engage parents in literacy. Our parent empowerment cafes and other community events empower parents to play an active role in their children's literacy journey, reinforcing the importance of family involvement in education. We also have community engagement and celebratory events, such as our inaugural Black History Month Spelling Bee, which took place in Wilmington, that exemplified our commitment to community and literacy. These events celebrate achievements and promote literacy in a fun and educational way. And last but not least, we have an increased emphasis on volunteerism. Through our Reading Angels program, volunteers can share their love for reading and books by being virtual or in-person readers in partnership with schools and other community-based organizations. You can go to the next slide. We now have a quick video in which we'd like to highlight our My Very Own Library initiative.
It was an amazing experience getting books, and I also had a really hard time getting books I wanted. You can read the back for like some information about the book, to learn more about the book. It was amazing, and I did get amazing books I wanted.
Reading is the key to everything. I tell them that if you read, the world is yours. Reading is going to give them the foundation to become adults that love to read, and that's going to affect their family life, their job, and everything in the future.
Developing a lifelong passion and love for reading is just integral to what we stand for as an educational organization, as a school district, but more importantly, it's freeing. It opens our minds to possibilities, to fulfill our dreams, to live out our goals and aspirations. It helps us discover new opportunities, new cultures, but also understanding a greater sense of who we are.
My name is Ariana C. and I'm in 5th grade. And it was fun getting my books because there is a big selection of books in here. And the books that I got are really good.
Yep. So thank you for allowing us just to take a few moments to just highlight some of the work that we're doing throughout the state of Delaware with our United Way of Delaware. So once again, if there are any questions, you can have them in the chat. And I know there'll be additional time on this webinar for questions as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ken and Dan. That was a rich presentation, and I love the videos, which gives us another way of really understanding your work very uniquely. I'm going to invite Sarah and Carly back on because we only have a few minutes left. And I noticed that there is a question in the chat that actually was reflective of one of the questions we were considering discussing during this Q&A period. And that is, how do you get started in your community? Right? If you are interested in tackling these issues, developing an out-of-school time program, thinking about the different roles that United Ways play in your partnerships, what advice do you have to our participants on if they're thinking about getting started? Should they first reach out to their United Way? How should they get started in this? And anyone can go, or I could call on. How about Ken, since you're first on my screen, how about if I ask you to respond first?
Right. Thank you. I know for me, I'm definitely a big advocate of community partnerships. So often individuals do contact me directly at the United Way just to ask how can they get involved in some of our initiatives. So it's just as simple as just making the phone call to your United Way organization and just letting them know like what you're interested in. And then I try to cater whatever initiative that we have going on to try to fit like their interests. So some people have, different interests, but if we want to help to plan like a book drive, or if you want to be a guest reader, or you want to just support something that we have going on, I really just focus on what their need is and then how we can address it together to work toward that common goal and common framework.
Wonderful for it. So really identifying where there are opportunities to partner and support their goals and your common goals. Dan, anything to add there?
Ken always nails it. One thing I would make an and to that is to take extra steps up front to make certain that you're not being duplicative and that you're not, as a United Way in particular, stepping into somebody's space. That's something we're always aware of as a United. Intentions are good, but you don't see intentions, you see actions. And so if your partnerships are closest with district or schools, start there and have those conversations. If they're closer with corporate, then what are the corporate goals? If it's on the ground, like community, like Ken was talking about, where do you invest? Where do you have investors? And start there and ask, listen, and then act. But start with ask.
Wonderful. Ask, listen, act. I love that. 3 things. Sarah, Carly, what would you like to add? How to think about starting this work in a community?
Yeah, I think a similar version of this is ask to have a seat at the table, right? So much of the work that we do is about connection and sharing and getting resources where they're going to be most effective. And with that foundation of really understanding what's happening in community and how we can best deploy our resources, our knowledge, our relationships, our partnerships, being there and listening and taking it all in is a really important first step.
Wonderful, wonderful. And I noticed that there's a question in the Q&A from Sonara, and that is, how do they get a literacy-focused program through the Bay Area chapter of the United Way? And I had also responded to something similar in the chat, that either Iola at the United Way Worldwide or I could help with those introductions. So if you send your email address, we will help with those introductions for sure. And with that, unfortunately, I think we are at time. So I just want to add my deep appreciation to Carly, Sarah, Ken, and Dan for the terrific work that you're doing in your communities in support of families and their economic mobility and two-generation approaches, and really paying close attention to how to support school success. And then always deep appreciation to Iola for the work that she's leading nationally as a leader at United Way Worldwide. And then I'm turning it over to Bonnie, who is an inspiration for me every day. So thank you all and have a wonderful rest of your afternoon. Bonnie, turning it over to you now.
Great. Do we have a slide from my team on upcoming webinars that everyone should see in advance of us actually? There you go. So just to let you know, there are some things, always something in the work happening at the campaign. So a couple of sessions you'll see on your calendar, the next one being Tuesday, October 1st. And I think you guys heard about those before. But just allow me to add my thanks to Marjorie, and really a special thanks to Marjorie for moderating the discussion, and for all of our panelists for sharing your expertise and experiences. I think we've heard that high quality out of school time programs are an essential component of our education system. They have the power to help learners bridge academic gaps, contribute to their social emotional growth, and simultaneously they can be a lifeline to working parents. So we hope that this session has helped to inform you as well as inspire the work that you're doing in your own communities to develop successful learners. We're going to have our final session in this series that happens in early December, so stay tuned. It's not on our slide yet, but you'll have more details forthcoming. So everybody have a great day. We look forward to seeing you soon, and thanks again so much for joining us today. Take care.